We didn't grow up knowing what executive function skills were. Life felt overwhelming. Managing time, staying organized, and feeling stuck made everything difficult. What we didn't realize was that we lacked the skills to plan, prioritize, and break goals into manageable steps. After years of trial and error, we've seen how powerful executive function skills can be. With expert interviews, real stories, and practical strategies, this podcast is the resource we wish we had. Whether you're a student, parent, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential. Welcome to the Executive Function for All podcast. Today we're discussing one of the most stressful hurdles for our families, the college application process. We're joined by Alyse Levine, who's an expert in helping students get into college and find the best fit for them. Alyse shares advice on how to help an overwhelmed student get started in the process, what parents of neurodiverse students are looking for in a college, and how to support independence without taking over. Alyse is an awesome resource, and I'm excited to share this one. Alyse, thank you so much for taking the time to join today.
My pleasure. So happy to be here, Brandon.
The reason I wanted to talk to you is because so many of the parents we work with, or, a student gets diagnosed with an executive function challenge, parents' heads go to the worst spaces. And you work with students all across the country, helping them get into the best school, the best college for them. And you see this all the time, and you still see plenty of students with these challenges eventually reach their goals. And that's why I wanted to have you on today.
Absolutely. We work with a really wide range of students, lots of really talented, bright students, and students definitely that sometimes have executive functioning challenges. So that's very much a part of what we do and the kinds of students that we work with.
Yeah, we'll get into fit in a bit, but I want to start talking about the actual process because this can be maddening for some parents. So I know a lot of parents have this thing where they're like, my child is smart. But the college application process is big and overwhelming. And our students with these challenges tend to get stuck and put it off. How do you guys help them get unstuck?
Yeah, we really try and break it down into bite-sized chunks where there are discrete pieces and tasks that we do in a pretty specific order that make sense based on when particular information is available and ready to complete. So the first step is creating a Common App account. We kind of put our pinky toes into the water. That's kind of easy, similar to registering on any website. Feeling of accomplishment, did it. We'll sit there with them if they're nervous. Then they can fill out some of the basic information about themselves, their name, their address. There are several sections like that don't require much thinking. We'll often say, when you've had a really busy, exhausting day and you've had to think a lot, this is a good thing to do at the end of the day because you don't have to think very hard and you can fill out this information and see all those check boxes and feel accomplished. And then when they're ready and starting to gain some confidence and some footing, we start the more thinking, thought-provoking sections, but we're right there with them to help them with that.
And does breaking it down and helping them get a start, do you see a lot of success with that?
We do. We start to see that they realize it's not as daunting as they thought it was. They start feeling a sense of accomplishment instead of seeing just a never-ending, enormous undertaking. They see that they are moving along, making progress, and that most of this is information they actually know about themselves. And so it's all about the finessing of the language, where to put what, how to present themselves. And we're there to help with some of that strategic thinking, have those conversations. Do I disclose that I have a learning disability or an executive functioning challenge? If so, where? So some of that mystery of some of the harder parts, they have a professional in their corner to guide them.
Thank you for saying professional, because I can hear a lot of parents out there saying like, why can't I do this? And you and I both know when a parent and a child try to do this process together, it gets really challenging. It gets very emotional.
It really does. This is a very transitional time in a young person's life. They're getting ready to transition to adulthood, to independent living. And so understandably, the parent is struggling with the letting go. It's hard to let go of our babies. I know, I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. And for the child, it's often a time where they really want that independence. And I think more than anything, our kids want to make us proud. And if they feel like they are struggling, they're worried that they're disappointing us.
Yeah, because a lot of parents that I know, and I do this myself too, we look right at the behavior. We're like, well, they keep putting it off. They keep putting it off. They don't want to go to college, or college isn't for them. But sometimes there's just these deep underlying challenges of not wanting to let people down and understanding how big of a deal this process is.
Absolutely. I do think it's really important for our kids to hear throughout this process that we're proud of them, encouraging them, being their cheerleader, pointing out the things that they're doing well, and putting the nagging and the getting the work done in a neutral party's hands. And I think that's where folks like you and I can really help make this process, I want to say, enjoyable. I can't promise every step will be enjoyable, but more enjoyable than when it's a lot of arguing in the house. And to be completely honest, I hired members of my team to work with my own 2 children because I wanted to be their mom, not their college counselor.
I remember you telling me that a few years ago, and I thought that was fascinating because you're like, this is like the last chance I get to enjoy my children. I don't want to be fighting over college applications. And it's such a great exercise to build these executive function skills, because when you take a big, overwhelming process like applying for college, like that attacks your executive function skills, and it gives us a chance to assess if this child is ready for independence or not. So tying into that, how does a parent know when to step in versus to step back? And what are mistakes that you see here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do think there are ways that a parent really can be helpful. I think that it can be helpful to discuss with your child what's financially possible, what travel distance wise. This is a family process. Parents need to be open and honest with their children and help with some of those aspects of the process that the child might not be able to do more independently. I think it's great to ask parents to do some proofreading, especially if you're not working with a private college counselor. There's no reason you can't ask your parents who know you well to take a look. Did I miss anything? Is there anything about this application as a whole that you think I overlooked? I think where parents can misstep is being really over involved. I think when they are directing the process, when it's their ideas being generated for the essay, when they are putting their agenda maybe about where they want their child to go to college in front of what the child wants, the child might reject that, even if it is a good idea or a good college fit, just because it feels like it is so badly what a parent wants. I think it is very natural for parents to put some of our own hopes and dreams and maybe unfulfilled hopes and dreams out there and want our child to execute some of what maybe we wanted for ourselves. And so stepping away and making sure that you're letting this be your child's process, I think is very, very important. I think the third area that is tempting for parents to overstep is with the essay writing itself. I think we have ideas as parents about what that central story is or how it should come across. But I do think that when parents get too involved, it does not sound like an 18-year-old's essay. It sounds like a 50-year-old mom's essay, and that's not good. It's first and foremost unethical, but secondarily, it won't sound like your child, and that's actually not going to help them.
Yeah, and you're so knowledgeable in this space. Do you see this a lot where when we help our students craft essays and messages, that actually turns off a lot of these admissions people's, because they can tell it's from someone who's not an 18-year-old?
Yeah, any direct communication with an admissions office or with an athletic coach or with an office of student services should come directly from the student. It is a bit of a sign of immaturity if that kind of communication is coming from the parent. Colleges see students as young adults. So even when they are in high school and applying, they want that communication to come directly from the student. It is totally appropriate for the parent to schedule visits at these colleges where you're clicking on a calendar and registering for a visit and purchasing airline tickets or train tickets. No one cares that that's a parent. But if it's a direct communication, phone, Zoom, email, certainly in an admissions office, the child needs to be leading that.
Yeah. Yeah. You spoke to something earlier that I wanted to dive deeper into, and that's organization. Obviously, some of our students struggle with organization, and this is a very challenging organizational process. How do you help students get set up so they can make sure to hit all their deadlines and communicate with the right athletic coaches when? How does that work?
So we have our own in-house workbook. You can certainly do this organizationally without premium prep or an independent counselor, but you must put spreadsheets and trackers in place with clear deadlines, knowing the actual deadlines for those colleges' applications, deadlines for interviews, and then prepare your own internal deadlines for when you are going to do those tasks or draft those supplemental essays or main essay for those ultimate deadlines. And then there needs to be columns that are specific to that student if you need to submit an art portfolio, if that college requires an interview, if that college does or does not have a separate application for a merit scholarship, if it's an automatic consideration, or if there are additional essays required. And are there different deadlines, or is it the same deadline as the general application? All of these examples vary from one school to another. It is not completely standardized. So organizational tools like trackers and spreadsheets in place for all of the moving parts of the application process.
Yeah, and this is a plug for if it's financially viable for a family to seek help from a college consultant. This is where it's so valuable, is because there's often money left on the table as well through scholarships that we just, if you don't work in this industry, you just don't know it is there. And so having someone help your child get really organized, especially if they struggle with these skills, I mean, that is just so valuable. And the thing that I know both of us are after is that it sets students up for success long term because it teaches them how to organize. And so we'll put a link to that workbook in the show notes. But yeah, this is where you're actually doing a lot of organizational training, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I think it is really preparing them for adulting, understanding how to get organized. It was so exciting to see students of ours creating their own spreadsheets for the first time using technology and organizational tools, mimicking things that we've created for their own parts of the process. And I have a feeling that students then are able to do that more successfully when they get to college, when they are planning their budget for their study abroad semester, or navigating trying to get their first summer internship and having to keep track of who have they reached out to, when is it time to follow up with this person or that person. These, as the adults in the room know, are great life skills.
And you said you had a feeling. I can tell you with certainty that they are doing it because we see them as they continue on in college. And again, people don't realize organization and these executive function skills, like they're just skills. They can be trained, they can be modeled, they can be taught. And that's why I'm a huge fan of this process, whether your student decides to go to college or not. I think it's just a valuable exercise to take this big, overwhelming thing, learn how to break it down and get organized and work yourself through it.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, since we do work with a lot of high achieving students that are ambitious and want to go to great schools, the college landscape has changed so much. The competition is so much stiffer now than when we all applied to college for a wide variety of reasons. That's a whole separate podcast. But it's important that parents recognize that things are really different now from when they applied to college. And colleges that may have seemed easier to get into when they applied might be really hard to get into now. A lot of schools have become significantly harder. Places like BU and Tulane and Maryland and NYU, Northeastern, single digit acceptance rates for their Boston campus. So it's really important to keep an open mind and to understand how much things really have changed.
Yeah, yeah. I want to come back in a second, but I want to dive into something you said about anxiety. So most people associate executive function deficits with anxiety, with ADHD, but anxiety and high levels of anxiety, there's, our executive function skills essentially turn off when we're in highly anxious states. I know you see a lot of perfectionist students who are very high achieving. What do you do throughout this process to help keep anxiety low so we can perform our best?
Yeah. I think one of the things is to begin working, frankly, with an independent counselor early so the trust is there, so we can read the room when we see the student is really feeling anxious and they know and trust us to be honest with us. Like, I'm kind of freaking out, it's finals, I'm feeling swamped. Whereas if we don't have that trust, they might be trying to hide some of that anxiety, act like everything's okay, and we're just another form of anxiety with more deadlines and more pressure. Whereas if they feel comfortable with that counselor, we typically recommend beginning working with a counselor in 10th grade. So there's a bit more of an on ramp to get to know each other, work together, talk through some of the other steps of high school, academic, course planning, summer planning, extracurriculars. So by the time you get to the application process, there's a bit of a trust and a rapport built in. So we can speak about the anxiety, name it, discuss how we can tackle that, how we can work through that, or maybe slow things down a little bit. If they need a little break, it's finals. Why don't you focus on that? This can wait. This can wait. A week is not going to set us behind. We might have to work more intensely once finals are over, but so what? You won't have finals, or you're taking the SATs for the third time. You really have to focus your energy there and not worry about your essays and your applications right now. So we don't always know the other pieces of what's happening in their life, or maybe it's prom, right? I mean, there are things in their life that are not academic, and we need to be sensitive to that.
It would be great. We can recommend all the strategies in the world, like mindfulness and all these things. Well, you and I both know when our students get highly anxious, sometimes they don't see it at this age. They haven't developed that self-awareness yet, especially students who struggle with these executive function skills. Having that relationship is such a big deal. And unfortunately, as humans, we buy Band-Aids and not vitamins. But having that relationship up front and waiting until you're out of crisis, it's going to save you a lot of heartache, and you're more likely to get much more out of this process.
Yeah. And I think having some of that self-awareness around what kind of college environment is going to be healthiest for you, you can be a very high achieving student, but not want to be in a cutthroat environment. And there are colleges that will match that, where that student might be more successful in an environment that's more collaborative than cutthroat. And so I do think that that fit and best match piece is really important. And the more the student can have that self-awareness, the greater the likelihood that they will find the kinds of schools that they can be most successful in.
Yeah. So how do you think about this best fit generally? I know you guys are working with so many different students, but generally, how do you help students find the best fit for them for college?
Yeah, so we start with another workbook where we're doing a lot of inventories and helping them identify what they value, what their interests are, what their goals are. So we don't talk always about college specifically, but more broadly, what they care about. Do you care about current events? Do you care about following college athletics and lots of school spirit? Do you care about social? What are the things that are kind of most important to you? Do you need to be close to home for particular reasons? Do you want to be far from home? Do you need access to a city? College is not just an academic experience. It's a full living, learning life experience. And you get to really make some choices. Whereas most students for high school don't get to make those choices. You go to the public school in your town, you've been in the same private school, K through 12. There are exceptions, of course, for students who go to prep schools or new schools in ninth grade. But for many, college is the first time you get some say. And so there's a lot of self-exploration and self-examination of what is important to you and what will help you be successful, and then starting to build that college list. And I think there's even more important layers to that for students who have executive functioning challenges, really knowing what you need to be successful.
Yeah. So if a student does have an ADHD or a learning challenge, and does it, you said there's more layers to it. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, again, looking inward, what have I needed to be successful in high school, and what will I need in college to be successful? And then knowing how to ask the questions and do the research to find the colleges that will have those supports and resources and really be able to provide that authentically. Like, it's not just something they claim to have, but really asking the right questions when you visit these schools, when you reach out to these schools, so that you are sure that they have the kinds of either accommodations, writing support, academic support that you might need. I think the other thing from a practical level, Brandon, that I would imagine many of your families know is that 504s and IEPs are for K through 12. And so while colleges often want to have that information and will continue to honor it, it is not automatic. It is something that there are lots of laws to support students in terms of the ADA, but the colleges will be doing their own evaluation and then informing students of what they can and can't provide on their campuses. So it is important to really investigate and understand that before you get somewhere.
A lot of times that's just not common knowledge. I think a lot of us think that these plans will follow us to college. You said get educated. You asked some great questions earlier about accommodations, but how do you recommend parents get educated about if the college is the right fit for the student based on their needs?
Yeah, I would definitely meet with the Office of Disability Services or Student Services. They're called different things depending where you go. I would try and set up a visit there. If you are not visiting in person, you can meet with them on Zoom. You can have email exchanges. I think that's an important thing for a student to do when they are exploring these schools, just like students make appointments with athletic departments or maybe even the speech and debate team, whatever the student's needs, interests are, to take the time to make those extra appointments and really do that research. Something else that some colleges offer are structured support programs. So for some students, that can be an added benefit. Very often there are fees attached to those programs. So again, knowing which schools offer those structured support programs, exactly how they're rolled out, and if they provide the kind of support, additional meetings, check-ins, safety net that some students really need to be successful in college.
Yeah, thank you for laying that out. Do you find yourself coaching families often away from the big name brand school?
I think that for many students who have learning differences, executive functioning differences, smaller classes, more interaction with faculty, more safety nets can be valuable. So some of the smaller schools might seem more conducive. And I think that because the trend right now is towards these bigger schools, kids want that sort of like full ESPN D1 experience, that can make us educators and parents anxious that kids can kind of fall between the cracks. But there are schools like that. Syracuse is a good example that have great support where you can still have that sort of full college experience. So I think you can get both, but I do think that there are some smaller schools that do a really excellent job of helping all students be successful, having those closer interaction with faculty, those smaller classes. Frankly, I think that could be beneficial for most of us. It's much harder to participate and really engage in a large lecture class, but I do think it's important to focus a bit more on fit and match than name and prestige. But I also understand that as parents, we want our students to go to the quote unquote best school that they can get into. And so it's hard to fully pull away from some of those factors.
Yeah. It's nearly impossible. But at the same time, I think you laid it out nicely where if you really do a deep dive, you can find a school. There's so many schools, right? There's so many universities. We can find a school that fits all of our needs. And that's why it's great to talk to an expert like you, just Syracuse rattling it off the top of your head. I mean, that's even having a consult with an expert is so helpful here.
Yeah.
So many of our parents are looking at their 9th grader and 10th grader who may be a hot mess at this point. You and I both know they do a lot of maturing over the next few years, but they're wondering how on earth is this student going to be independent? What is your most common piece of advice or pieces of advice you give to parents when they ask you that question?
Yeah, I think that's something that as parents, we always worry about. Like, are they going to be able to find the foods they want and eat healthy? Are they going to wake up for class? So I think helping them to do some things more independently, especially if they struggle a bit with independence and they are in the type of family and I am guilty of this, where a lot of those daily life skills have been done for them. It is important to help them practice those skills at home: laundry, budget, making their bed, cleaning their room. I think as parents, we struggle with wanting to take that one added thing off their plate. They're so busy. They're so stressed or anxious, but they have to learn to deal with all of those things in college. There's not going to be someone there to help them with that. So I do think that as they progress through high school, 9th, 10th, certainly 11th and 12th grade, helping them gain some of those life skills and maybe fall a little bit, fail a little bit, struggle a little bit is how they will learn. And that is so much easier said than done. My children are 19 and 21, and I still hate watching them struggle or fail. So I say that, but I sympathize.
Yeah. And you brought up the core ones that we see students struggle with all the time. Budgeting is a huge deal, especially for students with impulse control challenges. So learning how to do that, and it may mean in high school, they may not be able to go out with friends one night because they use their money, but that's just how we learn. And then laundry, the amount of kids that can't figure out a washing machine and drying machine. And then another one to add is some basic cooking skills. Obviously, most of them will have meal plans, but I think I've talked to 3 or 4 students on the phone over the past year who put frozen hamburger on the stove and it didn't end well, right? So just some basic cooking skills are the ones where
Yes,
those little ones, you'd be amazed the amount of anxiety it just takes away from students, even if they have the basics.
yeah. I think another one that's big, Brandon, is like learning to be comfortable on a phone, sending
Mm.
an email to an adult, emailing your teacher in high school with a question, approaching someone, in ordering for yourself online, or certainly most kids these days know how to order from Grubhub, right? But what if it's the kind of place where you have to actually call? I think this generation is not as comfortable on the phone, knowing how to make their own doctor's appointment, find health services, navigate a college's website. We do spend time helping students learn how to research a college on the website. That is not always an innate skill. We do help students with how to email the student support services with their questions or admissions. A lot of students have not written email. I think as adults, email is such a part of our culture. We grew up with email in our college years. It's such a part of the normal day-to-day activity. We find, and I'm sure you find this, Brandon, as well, that students are just not used to checking their email every day. We insist they check their email. We tell them they might need to create a new email account just for college so it doesn't get lost in all the junk mail that they get. But those are some really important daily life skills that this process of applying to college is great practice for when they're on their own in college. So I think home is the best place to practice these skills. College is the next best place because there's still some good safety nets if you mess up. And then by the time hopefully you get out into the real world, you're ready. You're ready to take it on.
Such a great piece of advice. That's my number one response usually to when families ask, what can we do to ease this transition? It's the ability to have hard conversations, whether that's in person with a challenging roommate, with you slept through your 9 a.m. class and you got to figure it out with the professor who's grumpy with you, or through email. It's the ability to have conversations in different formats. And that is such a huge skill. And for whatever reason, that's hard for parents to coach students on. They just get defensive. So yeah.
One thing I will say that I find with students with learning differences, or I find that very often they have better skills than some of my other students with self-advocacy, because very often from a young age, they have had to learn how to do that. And they have had to accept in 3rd grade what it feels like to have to go to a separate space to take a test and feel embarrassed and come to terms with that and realize I need that. I'm not going to let being embarrassed get in the way because this is what helps me be successful. And so I do want to say that because I know we're talking about a lot of the additional challenges this population faces with the transition to college. But in some ways, I think they are more prepared for that self-advocacy.
I could not agree more. And this is why we see a lot of our students launch and actually do better in college, which is why we advise parents not to project when their student is in 9th or 10th grade, because we just don't know. A lot of these coping skills you're talking about have the opportunity to be a gift and to be comfortable in this chaos. And going to college and leaving your home feels like chaos. And so we're a lot more comfortable. So Alyse, this was so insightful for me. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Absolutely. We are at premiumprep.com. They can also just call us up if they prefer at 1-800-560-8760. If anybody wants to follow up with me directly, my email is alevine, Levine, at premiumprep, all one word, .com.
And one of the things I love about your website, which I don't see many places, is that it's not just for college coaching. You can get different pieces of this, like workbooks and other pieces, which I found so helpful. So even if you're not looking for the full package, I highly recommend this resource.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on the Executive Function for All podcast. If today's episode brought you any value, please rate us 5 stars and share it with someone who may benefit. And remember, every small step you take builds towards your success. For resources and guidance, visit untappedlearning.com. Keep growing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.